Russia, then and now. The following clips give you a little idea of how things sounded that morning, but no idea of how it actually felt.
Что это такое? Бомбардировка, нахуй! Артподготовка, блин! Да не сын, пока еще ничего нету. Артподготовка это. Ебать! Что такое?
Непонятно. Была такая ярчайшая вспышка и исчезла. И вот туда дальше. Ой. Охренеть. Где-то упал. Слышишь? Это знаешь, что было? Это он сверхзвуковой. Это, похоже, астероид. Это звуковая волна, астероид. Реально.
Very cool, but scary sounds. The sonic wave hit about 3 minutes after the meteor streaked across the Chelyabinsk sky. The shock wave from this broke windows in about 3,000 homes throughout the city and also caused some roofs and factories to even collapse. I felt it as I was standing on my balcony. It actually hurt. It hurt so badly. Within about half a second of that sonic boom, a couple things happened. A, my ears felt as if they were about to burst, and my eyeballs also felt like they were ready to collapse. Fortunately, within about almost as quickly as it came, half a second, that feeling was gone. I thank God for this. I couldn't have handled more than that. It was this shockwave that injured about 1,200 people all across Chelyabinsk that day. And thank God nobody died. All of these injuries happened within about 1 or 2 seconds of each other, all very, very quickly. And almost all of the injuries were due to flying shards of glass, people getting badly cut by flying glass. For many of us, there are a few world events that we either witness or partake in that we remember exactly what we were doing at the time and remember vividly the memories of these events. For me, these would be the assassination of John F. Kennedy, Neil Armstrong walking on the moon, the terrorist attacks on the World Trade Centers, and now the Chelyabinsk Meteor explosion. And I think it's actually this last one that affected me the most for the simple reason that I only shared that actual memory with about 1 million other people. And 1 million sounds like a lot, but when it comes to all of humanity, it's sharing it with a very small, unique group of people. I'll now tell you a little bit about my story. The meteor came crashing through the sky at about 9:20 in the morning in Chelyabinsk. I don't remember what day of the week it was, but not important. My wife had just left for work. She left at about 9 o'clock, which meant she was in transit at 9:20. My father-in-law was there because he was going to watch our daughters after I went to work. So he was there. My daughters were obviously there too. And I was in the bathroom just shaving. I was going to leave like at 9:30. So I was in the bathroom doing some last minute shaving. I had the door open. I mean, there's nothing private I'm doing. I'm just shaving. So I'm in the bathroom and suddenly a very bright light flashed into the bathroom. I thought it came from the corridor, and to be honest with you, I figure it was just a light bulb that burnt out. I mean, that happens, you know, light bulb up in the ceiling, burns out, but it, you know, big blast of light on its way out. So I finished shaving, another minute or so, and I walked out of the bathroom, and I looked over at the kitchen window, and I saw my father-in-law looking out the window. Well, we couldn't communicate really well with each other, so I went to my daughter's room, and they were looking out the balcony window. They had a balcony, an enclosed balcony in their room. I said, "What are you doing?" They said, "We're looking at something." So I went out my balcony. We had a second balcony in the house. I went to that balcony. I went to open the door to go step out onto the balcony. And just as the door was just barely open, boom! But I can't do the sound justice. You heard it, and even that doesn't do it justice. It wasn't so much what you heard, it's what you felt. In the half second since that big boom, suddenly my ears felt as if they were ready to explode. My eyeballs felt as if they were ready to pop. I mean, and then within about a half second, that was all gone. Thank God. But it was terrible. It was excruciating pain. And while this happened, I'm looking forward, and I don't know if it was because my eyeballs were squishing or what, but the window, big window on the balcony, one of the big 3 windows we had, the glass actually, now mind you, the time since it flashed, I saw the flash of light while I was shaving, and the time that I heard and felt the big sonic boom when I tried to open the balcony door, about 3 minutes had gone by. So that gives you an idea of how far away this object was when it came into the atmosphere and exploded. The bad thing about having so much time there between the flash and the boom, the bad thing about it, of course, is that gave plenty of time for people throughout the city to be looking out their windows also. I don't know if I mentioned this or not, but probably a lot of people didn't see the actual flash of the meteor coming through the atmosphere, you know, or when it exploded, you didn't see it explode. You just saw a huge smoke trail, like a double trail even, and swimming within that smoke was fire, just amazing, very far away, but still very, very huge. Most people didn't see that, but they would hear something, or something would get their curiosity. Why did it suddenly get brighter? They would go to their windows, and that's where the problem occurred, because 3 minutes later, when the shock wave hit, windows blasted all over the city and covered people with broken glass, threw it at them. And that's how most all of the 1,200 injuries occurred, was from that broken glass. So I left the house and I started to go to work. I was at the bus stop, and I saw several people at the bus stop even holding up gauze up to their face, trying to staunch bleeding that they had, or something on their arms, something that was on exposed skin. The streets in front of many apartment buildings were covered with broken glass, where glass had fallen out, gotten blasted, fallen down to the street level, and was on the street. I got on the bus, started heading towards the city, and lots of other people would get on the bus who were obviously injured, injured by glass. I'm not saying people with broken legs and arms, but still injured, just getting themselves up to the bus, waiting for a bus. I mean, getting on a bus and bringing themselves in for medical care. Because something very noticeable missing that morning was the sound of sirens, whether it be police cars or ambulances. I really didn't hear any, so that tells me people were pretty much taking care of themselves. Well, towards where I worked in the center was one of the big state universities, and that area was really damaged. I mean, it was just window frames and windows hanging out and glass covering the streets, and everything was just a mess. Must have been just the direction that it was facing, according to where the sonic boom came from. I made it into work. I walked in. saw my secretary, and she was kind of trying not to laugh. I couldn't quite understand it. And I said, how is everything? And she said, well, you know, she's telling me some problems. And she said, the American consulate called looking for you. I said, really? She said, yeah, they were concerned. They called, wanted to make sure that you were okay. And she was having a hard time keeping a straight face. I'm still not really sure why. I mean, either it was, she couldn't believe that, you know, consulate people would actually do this, or, of course, I'm afraid maybe it makes me look like a baby because I've got consulate people calling me. Meanwhile, grandmothers are on the street bleeding like crazy and they're taking care of themselves just fine. I don't know which it was, but I was actually pretty impressed that the consulate called me. I had people who I hadn't heard from or communicated with in years contacting me by email, etc., and messengers to ask me if I'm okay. And I don't even know how they even remember the name of the city where I moved to, but they did, and they sought me out, and they wanted to know that I was okay because they're hearing about this Russian city exploding meteor, you know, thousands of people injured. To pick a word, or a couple words, I was greatly touched. I was. It really made me feel good, and that these people who I hadn't communicated with for such a long time would remember me and be concerned enough about me to be contacting me to find out if I'm okay. So it was a very nice human moment, of which there were many during this catastrophe. Something that I also found after that is all the people in the city, we shared this event together somehow. We're all connected differently. I can't tell what it is, but I could tell it existed. Just a little bit different connection that we had after that didn't exist before that. We'd all experienced something together. We went through something together that the rest of the world hadn't experienced. And that feeling never totally went away from me again for the next 6 years while I was still in Chelyabinsk. Well, this is related but unrelated. I worked for a private language school. That was one of my 2 jobs in Chelyabinsk, private English language school. And part of my job there was to visit different groups of students, mainly kids and teenagers, and just go in and we'd speak about things just to give them practice talking. And it was interesting because they could ask whatever questions they wanted to instead of following something very rigidly in a book. And it was interesting for me. I learned a lot about people there by doing this. So this Chelyabinsk Meteor, of course, gave me a new topic of discussion with them. So often I'd go into a group and I'd point to someone, I'd say, tell me your meteor story. And they'd tell us, okay, so they'd say, I was asleep, a bright flash happened, I opened my eyes, then I closed them, I fell asleep again. A few minutes later, a loud boom happened. I opened my eyes, then I closed them and I fell back asleep again. I said, okay, I understand. That's probably a lot of our stories, actually. But I said, let's think in terms of you're young and someday you're going to have grandchildren. And someday your grandchildren are going to learn that you lived through the Chelyabinsk meteor explosion. Is that the story you want to tell them? Because they're never going to ask you to tell them any other stories. So let's work at something here. I'll teach you a few new vocabulary words. The first vocabulary word I'm going to teach you is the verb to embellish. Okay? In this case, to embellish means to add different details to your story to make your story more interesting for the listener. So here you go. Here's a new story for you. You weren't lying in bed, you know. You're supposed to be in school. It's 9:20. But you see there, half the kids go in the afternoon and half the kids go in the morning. But anyhow, you were in class when the meteor exploded. So you were in the class and your teacher was teaching. Suddenly a bright light lit up the room. It was so bright that you couldn't see anything after that for a moment or two. You were all very curious, including your teacher, and you all went to the window to see what was going on. You rolled up the window shades and or blinds or whatever so you could get a good view. And You were gazing in amazement at that fiery smoke trail that the meteor had left. All of you, you're looking at it, for several minutes. Well, 3 minutes after the flash, of course, came that boom. Suddenly, boom! The windows of the classroom blew in. Most students were blown back onto the floor, onto their butts. All you remember is you were on the floor. You didn't know how you got there. You couldn't hear anything. You had loud ringing in your ears. You got up and you noticed you're covered with blood. And you're, oh my God, what's wrong? You're checking yourself for any sort of wounds and you can't find anything. Then suddenly you look at the floor and there is Ivan in 2 pieces. His head was sheared off by a piece of glass, a piece of window glass. That's where the blood came that was covering you. Now I said, now at this point in your mind's eye, look at your future grandchildren who are asking you this story, because now they are watching you and their mouths are open. They can't believe this story you're telling them. It's the greatest story they've ever heard, and you've become now their new superhero, their superhero grandfather or grandmother. And there you go. The meaning of the word embellish and how it can help your story. I'm going to go with one. I could speak about this Chelyabinsk Meteor all day because it was a huge event for anyone who experienced it. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to tell one story though. In addition to teaching at a private language school, I taught at one of the 2 big state universities in the city of Chelyabinsk. And I was working with master's degree students who were future translators and interpreters. And one of the things we would do for practice is we would go to like different museums or different places. A big local museum was just opening up an exhibit on what? The Chelyabinsk meteorite. So let's go. They've even got a big huge piece from the meteorite that they fished out of a lake. So we went, and what we would do is we would go in and we would hire a Russian guide, and then my students, I would see things, I would ask my students, they would take turns being my interpreter. It was good, very good practice, and it was great for me. I learned a lot this way. But this particular day, I turned to one of my students at one point, and I just a disattached thought I had. I said, could you imagine if you had lived in Chelyabinsk all your life? You were born there, you lived there all your life, nothing ever happening, nothing great to talk about or anything else. Finally, you're in your 20s, you have a nice job, and your boss is sending you to Moscow, sending you to Moscow on a business trip. It just happens to be the day before the Chelyabinsk Meteor, and you'll be coming back the day afterwards. So you lived all your life in Chelyabinsk, never saw anything, and when the biggest thing that ever happened there occurs, you're gone. I said, man, you would feel like such a loser if that happened. Our guide, our Russian-speaking guide, looks over at us and she says, in English, she says, I loser. Then she started speaking in Russian, and it was interpreted to me. She told how she had a girlfriend that she used to go to school with, moved to another city, and finally she made all the arrangements to go visit her girlfriend for like a week, and she did. It was during that time that the Chelyabinsk meteor exploded. And I'm trying to say in English and having my students interpret it. I'm so sorry, it wasn't really, it was meant as kind of a joke. It wasn't meant to be a hurtful comment or a judgmental comment. And she said basically, no, it's no problem, in Russian. It's no problem. I have thought this same thought 100 times since the Chelyabinsk meteor exploded. Well, that's all I'm going to talk about for now. Maybe I've gone too far, I don't know. It's been very fun speaking about it, and until I see you again next time, пока.